For me, a holiday is that inevitable mix of having privacy and quietness, and yet not feeling completely cut off from what's going on in the world. I don't like that feeling of being cocooned that seems to appeal to some people. You know, that kind of pretending that the rest of the world doesn't exist. So access to the main satellite channels is a must as far as I'm concerned. Though I limit myself to the main bulletins and only stay tuned if there's a story that I'd like to hear more about.
Well, as a musician, I travel on tour as well as for recreation, so the actual travel part is hardly the main attraction. But I have to admit that I also like to keep in touch with what's going on wherever I am, though I can live without the TV, actually. Perhaps that's why I could never stand a holiday that went on beyond, say, 10 days. I start going a little bit crazy then, you know. You get beyond feeling rested and start feeling restless. At least on tour you've got work to occupy you as you travel from place to place.
How fit do you have to be to drive a Formula One car?
As fit as any other world-class athlete.
So, do you train on the move?
Yes, wherever I happen to be. I don't particularly like the monotony of a gym routine. I prefer to do sports that I enjoy, such as jet skiing, cycling and swimming, that give you a similar sort of workout.
Is there a part of your body that you have to work on more than any other?
My neck muscles have to be very strong to deal with the incredibly high G-forces that you experience when braking and cornering. There are really no effective gym exercises for this. The best thing to do is to drive the car a lot in testing.
So are you a natural behind the wheel?
I think everyone who reaches the level of F1 has basic driving talent, but on its own it's not enough. You have to fine-tune your driving to suit any car. That's the key. And you also need a good mechanical understanding of how each particular car works in order to get the best out of it.
Do you have a story to tell, or do you just love writing? Our short story competition has great prizes and could set you on the path to greater things. You could win a first prize of £1,500 and see your story in print in a top weekly newspaper. The 9 finalists will all get the chance to attend the glittering National Book Awards dinner in London, where they'll rub shoulders with the big names who will also be up for awards, as well as hearing whether they've impressed the judges with their own efforts. Moira Blake, who heads the panel, is with me now. Any advice, Moira, for anyone thinking of having a go?
Well, I'd say first read lots of different short stories to get into the shape and rhythm of them. Any good ones will do, and you'll see they don't always have a twist at the end. Then, once you start writing, be yourself. Don't imitate others. It's your story, your spark. Just keep it very tight. The real secret is to keep your time frame nice and simple. You'll get into hot water if you try to construct a sweeping family saga within the word limit.
When it comes to trekking destinations, Nepal has to be one of the best. With 8 of the world's 10 peaks over 8,000 metres, the landscape in itself is enough to leave you awestruck, even before you catch sight of Mount Everest. It might seem unthinkable, but you don't need to be particularly adventurous nor experienced to tackle the Himalayas. You just need the right gear, a modicum of physical fitness, and the right attitude. Having said that, it's not something to be taken lightly either. So here are some points worth considering. Firstly, when to go. Certain times of year are better than others. The winter months are cold yet settled, but snow will make some routes impassable, whilst the monsoon rains, from May to September, make trekking uncomfortable and sometimes downright dangerous. October and November, when the air's clear and fresh and it's reasonably warm, are probably your best bet. Failing that, March and April are next best, but views can be hazy at that time. There are a number of popular routes, but allow more time than you think you'll need. One of your party's bound to get sick or need a rest, so just keep in mind that it's not a race. Choose your travelling companions carefully. You don't want to find out too late that you're stuck with someone who can't keep up or who sets too fast a pace. Trekking in Nepal isn't always easy. In fact, people say it can feel like you're walking in pudding, such is the effect of walking at altitude. You can't predict whether this feeling will hit you, but if you take it slow and drink plenty of fluids, the majority of people cope well enough. But you do need to get the right equipment. Appropriate footwear and a good first aid kit are always essential, and people know this, but if you're going above 3,000 metres, it can get cold at night, and the commonest problem's an inadequate sleeping bag. So, get a good quality one, by which I mean a full-price known brand from an authenticated supplier. Cheap imitations, and this applies to backpacks, socks and gloves too, locally made products with famous labels sewn on may be a false saving in the long run. Of course, you can join organised treks, where everything is organised. All you need to do is walk, which can be quite comforting. But going it alone can be very rewarding, not to mention cheaper if you're up to it. But you'll need to carry your own supplies and tent, which can be very demanding, so hiring a porter's a good idea. And remember that a guide is simply that, and while they'll generally act as a translator, they won't carry your gear. You'll need a porter for that. What's more, it's important to ascertain the credentials of guides before you put your life in their hands. Although there are agencies locally, finding one through a guest house is usually the safest option. Also, don't forget that many local people try to make money as porters and guides, but have inadequate clothing and equipment. Take responsibility for their welfare and kit them out properly before you agree to go with them. So, before I go on to look further...
My guest today is the Irish comedian Kevin Burke, now a familiar face on our TV screens. Kevin, welcome.
Hi.
And it's generally a smiling face we see too, isn't it, Kevin? But are you really like that, or is there another you, behind the painted smile, as it were?
Well, I'm always being asked that. The cliché that every comedian carries within a black heart is fundamentally untrue. I'm afraid my childhood unfolded without major incident, and to date there's been very little trauma in my life, so I'm sorry to disappoint everyone, but I'm a fairly well-adjusted human being. People wrongly tend to assume that comedians will be prone to depression. It's probably because the comedian is always finding humour in everyday misery. That's how comedy works. It's what makes it funny. I know these things. I've read about them in books.
Yes, tell me about the books, because you really mean that, don't you?
Indeed I do. There's one particular book I admire. It's called Laughter, and it's by a neuroscientist called Robert Provine. He's the world's leading expert on laughter. Now, it wasn't his intention, but it reads like a kind of how-to book for comedians. Did you know, for example, that in the comfort of your own home, you rarely laugh out loud, no matter how funny a joke or situation might be? But in a cafe, chatting amongst friends, you'll laugh at almost anything without fail. Most of the time, laughter's simply a nervous mechanism, a breaking of tension. Audiences laugh at comedians because those around them are laughing too. It's a social thing, according to Provine. And so, as a stand-up comedian, all I do is break their collective tension. I lift the audience up and then drop them.
It's probably safe to assume that not all comedians approach comedy quite so theoretically, isn't it? I mean, you're university educated, aren't you?
You're probably right, but then that's me, I'm afraid. I'm not particularly proud of the fact, but there you are. Yes, I did mathematical science as my degree subject. I've always loved words, adored English at school, but was drawn inexorably towards numbers, and I loved every minute of it. But the trouble with maths at university level is it attracts some incredibly clever, focused people, which doesn't exactly make for a fun social life. That's how I came to join the Debating Society. And that kind of got me noticed, because I have a way with words as well as with numbers. And before I knew it, I was writing for the university newspaper as well, doing orientation meetings for new students. I loved anything with an audience, you see. I couldn't help myself.
So that was the beginning of your career as an entertainer, really?
Well, sort of. After graduation, I began working for a local newspaper, writing a weekly column that was 700 words of whimsical nonsense. It was fun, but I wasn't set on journalism, so I started dabbling in stand-up comedy, just testing the water in various clubs at first. I hustled and gigged wherever possible, gradually building up my act and always on the lookout for the next opening. Then, one day, I landed a TV spot in Ireland, hosting a children's programme. From there, I kind of hopscotched over to comedy.
Is that the way to do it then?
Yes, once your name's known, you get asked to do a few different kinds of programmes, which I did. After that, doors start opening up in all directions. You learn what to accept and what to avoid. I once did a quiz show, and it was disastrous. I won't be doing that again, but it was a useful experience at the time. But TV feels comfortable for me, and I'm happy to go along with most of whatever comes along. But I'm definitely happiest when I'm on stage. It's certainly where I think I'm best, and TV can't capture that somehow. Although the TV work is just as challenging in its own way.
How do you account for your success on stage, then?
The game of comedy is all about owning the stage. And from a physical point of view, it's beneficial that I'm a larger man. From my lumbering presence alone, I can't really help but dominate the stage. People think I'm older than I am actually, which also helps. People feel uncomfortable if comedians look too young or vulnerable. I've always looked like everybody's dad. When I was 9, I looked 11, and so on. Once, I based an entire show on me looking older than I was. I asked the audience to guess my age. The average turned out to be 37. I was 29 at the time. Sad, eh? But as someone who applies scientific logic to much in my life, I've come to see the positive side of that too.
Kevin, there we must leave it. Thanks for being with us today.
Speaker 1.
I really look forward to my lunch, and after being on my feet all morning, I'm ready for it, especially if I've been on cosmetics or on the till, which is quite tiring. I mean, we have to take it in turns, because of course we're still open at lunchtime. But there's a staff canteen where we can go, and it's a chance to get to know people working in other departments, which I really like. We get the same food as in the public restaurant, which the customers use, and there's always a choice of soup, salad, or a cooked meal. But we have our own room to eat in, so it's quite sociable, really.
Speaker 2.
I really like to spend lunchtime on my own. After you've spent all morning talking to customers, trying to sort out problems with their gas bills, a bit of peace and quiet is really welcome. Not all of my colleagues agree, though, and most go to the staff canteen. But they only do pizzas and pies and stuff like that there, and when you're basically sitting down all day looking at a screen, you don't want too much stodge in the middle of the day. I prefer to grab a sandwich. I couldn't even tell you what's in it most of the time, because I'm not really interested, as long as I have something. I cook myself a nice meal in the evening.
Speaker 3.
You're lucky if you get the full hour here, because lunchtime appointments are really popular, and you've got to be flexible. Clients sometimes turn up late. You get behind, but you've still got to be ready for whoever's coming after your break. Some of the girls bring in stuff they've made at home, but I've got a friend who works in the travel agency opposite, and I usually go to a cafe with her. I hate being rushed at meal times, so that suits me, and I enjoy the chat. She's really useful for getting cheap flights when I need them too, because, let's face it, although you do get tips, the only person making any money at the salon is the owner.
Speaker 4.
Basically, when I'm on an assignment, the last thing I think about is lunch. I generally have something when I get back to the studio, but it's never at a regular time. But I've got a little fridge there, so I can knock myself up something at any time, which is what I like to do. My receptionist laughs at me, but at least I do have something, which is more than can be said for her. Sometimes, if I'm doing a wedding or a function in a hotel, I might be offered lunch. But you have to eat whatever's provided, and I'm a bit of a fussy eater, so I usually say no.
Speaker 5.
In theory, lunch is provided for us. You know, we can have ours once we've served everybody else, if it's long haul, or once we've reached our destination, if it's short haul. To be honest, I rarely bother because you soon get fed up with the food, and I like to have something different each day. And that's just not on offer. You usually get a decent stopover, however, and so I get to try some of the local food as well as going shopping or even getting my hair done. I mean, I chose this job because I wanted to travel, so I like to make the most of it. Though I must say not all my colleagues do that, actually.